Before this video begins, I would just like to thank my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez. Thank you for supporting the channel. Mewtwo. We all know and love it. It's a Pokemon that needs no introduction, but I'm going to give it one anyway. Tucked away at the very end of the original Pokédex is this rare, one-of-a-kind Pokemon that awaits you in Cerulean Cave. Mewtwo is unique in that it is completely man-made, developed on Cinnabar Island in an attempt to replicate the evasive Mew and create the ultimate lifeform, which obviously isn't Relicanth, no matter how much Pokédex propaganda you spout. Understandably, due to this fascinating backstory, statistical dominance, and just a really cool design, Mewtwo quickly became one of the most popular Pokemon of all time, and nearly 30 years later, it remains a fan favourite and one of the most revered legendaries of all time, even if X and Y ruined it. And I think this reputation is fully deserved, especially because that dark backstory forces us to confront the treatment of Pokemon and the nature of humanity playing God. In fact, I would go as far as saying Mewtwo is Pokemon's Frankenstein.
Sounds like a real Pokenstein.
In 1818, author Mary Shelley released her seminal work Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. This novel follows young, ambitious, and immensely talented scientist Victor Frankenstein, who discovers a new element of life and uses it to assemble different body parts into a mismatched, grotesque humanoid creature he grants life and sentience. The monster is so horrifying that Frankenstein flees and the monster escapes, only to be rejected and shunned by humanity, forced into a solitary life of misery made worse by his intelligence and his learning. Frankenstein's monster is given a life one might consider a curse.
I love dead, hate living.
And then abandoned by his very creator, his own father figure of sorts, instilling within him a resentment of humanity as a whole. Frankenstein's monster feels betrayed and isolated, so he relentlessly seeks vengeance upon his creator and takes everything from him in return. The world called him a monster, so that's what he became. Despite the modern interpretations of the story focusing on the obvious body horror and pulpy thriller of the narrative, the original Frankenstein story is a deeply human one about control, ostracization, and playing God. It's a very tragic and bittersweet tale, and one that is mirrored very clearly in Mewtwo's own story. As we learn in the original Pokemon games and the first movie Mewtwo Strikes Back, Mewtwo was created by Dr. Fuji with the funding of Team Rocket boss Giovanni. Tragically, this was actually Dr. Fuji hoping to create a clone of his dead daughter Amber, but these experiments failed and only Mewtwo remained. As we see in the movie, Mewtwo instantly despises its nature as an experiment, a mere scientific instrument rather than an independent being.
A laboratory specimen? This cannot be my destiny.
So it destroys the lab, or in the games, the Pokemon Mansion. In the movie and the anime series, Giovanni then takes ownership of Mewtwo and turns it into a weapon, the ultimate being capable of defeating any Pokemon. Giovanni uses Mewtwo as an asset for Team Rocket, to steal Pokemon and destroy powerful trainers to further tighten control over the Kanto region, all under the pretense of focusing and honing Mewtwo's power. Much like Frankenstein's monster, Mewtwo quickly grows to resent humanity for its cruelty, since all it has ever known is Giovanni's vision for the world. So it breaks free, escaping into the wild to make its own way as an independent creature. And again, much like the monster in Shelley's novel, Mewtwo seeks vengeance against its creators and the entire human race, like we see in Mewtwo Strikes Back as it tries to destroy all of humanity in favour of cloned Pokemon like itself. The exact kind of outcome Frankenstein feared when his monster asked for a female companion. All Mewtwo has known is a world of pain, suffering, and rejection. It has never known any compassion, so it's a monster of our own creation because it never knew anything else and never knew anything better. One of the core shared ideas of both Mewtwo and Frankenstein's monster is that of playing God and artificial parenthood.
In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God.
These creatures aren't natural. They were born through science, breaching our ideas of the sanctity of nature and existence as a whole. Remember the subtitle of Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus. That refers to the mythological story of the Titan Prometheus, who created humanity on behalf of Zeus, only to trick his god and give humanity fire in a huge act of defiance. According to some sources, Mary Shelley was a believer in the idea of Prometheus as being similar to the devil, and introducing sin and vice to humanity. Therefore, it makes sense that she herself would draw a parallel between Victor Frankenstein and Prometheus as two figures defying nature and divinity. Dr. Fuji, no matter his motivations, is also a comparable character perverting the course of nature. He took the DNA of Mew, a rare and unique one-of-a-kind lifeform, and took it upon himself to clone it and create new life in the form of Mewtwo, defying Arceus, the god of Pokemon, in the process. And, of course, Giovanni is far worse, influencing this creation into being one of power and destruction. Ostensibly, Giovanni considers Mewtwo his creation, and it's interesting to see the differences in perception compared to Frankenstein and his own creation. Despite being like a father to his monster, Frankenstein despises and fears what he created. The monster was born out of curiosity and obsession, only for its very existence to consume Frankenstein with guilt and regret.
I made him with these hands, and with these hands I'll destroy him.
The pair both seeking a mutual revenge upon one another. Frankenstein is a tragic figure in the original text, questioning his personal responsibility for the monster. Giovanni, on the other hand, relishes the power and the control afforded to him by Mewtwo's artificial origin. Frankenstein did what he did just to see if he could.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
But Giovanni did what he did out of pure hunger for power and control. A bespoke killing machine more powerful than anything else, and something he can manipulate for his own ends. In fact, this just reinforces Frankenstein as a tragic figure, never seeking to control his powerful monster and actively fearing the potential of it reproducing and creating a whole race like it. In the hands of a more Machiavellian character, there's little doubt the monster would find itself living a life like Mewtwo finds itself forced into. It emphasises the question of responsibility for an artificial lifeform, because as its creator, you dictate its actions and its course in life. Like I mentioned before, Frankenstein's monster and Mewtwo are simply reflections of the culture that created them. I think the most tragic element of these two beings is their self-awareness as artificial, freakish creations. Mewtwo is a highly intelligent, psychically powerful Pokemon with incredible perception, able to instantly understand how and why it was created, lamenting that nature as a science project. Frankenstein's monster, despite often being represented as brutish or mentally deficient, is actually very smart, and learned through his own ability, learning how to read and write in his lonely life hiding away from humans. He understands his creation and his nature, similarly lamenting how his life was created as an experiment, with no concern for his sentience or life after coming to be.
You gave me these emotions, but you didn't tell me how to use them. Did you ever consider the consequences of your actions?
Neither creation is even granted the individuality of a unique name. Frankenstein refuses to name his creature, rather just referring to it as a monster, a creature, a fiend, and even much stronger terms like vile insect. Mewtwo, on the other hand, is considered nothing more than a replication of Mew before it. They're created and then rejected as independent beings, unsurprisingly moulding them into vengeful forces. And both of these characters come to regret their path of vengeance and anger at their creators, as justified as it may be. Like Mewtwo famously reflects, the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It's what one does with life that determines one's destiny. One of the shared themes between both characters is this idea of their environment villainizing them. As Frankenstein's monster laments, based upon his reading of Paradise Lost, "I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good, misery made me a fiend." Evil or apathy is a learned behaviour. It isn't installed within either of these characters from birth. The monster's evil comes from humanity rejecting it when it tries to connect or help. Mewtwo's hatred of humanity comes from being shown a lack of compassion and being turned into a tool. In fact, we even see Mewtwo as young, starry-eyed and idealistic in its early days, learning about life and love from Amber 2 during a psychic connection. But when she dies, Mewtwo is filled with sadness, an emotion it doesn't understand and therefore sees as a bad thing, wondering how tears can be good if they can't bring Amber 2 back. These faint echoes of a memory of Amber 2 are enough to send Mewtwo on this course of vengeance. Mewtwo is capable of love, and it is capable of caring, but its environment strips that away from it, turning it into the villain we see in the movie. Just like Frankenstein's monster, misery made Mewtwo a fiend. Both of them struggle with the fact they were made rather than born, deprived of a natural origin like everything else in the world they're thrust into, and rejected and excluded from the world. And both these characters are therefore used to hold a mirror to humanity's own evil. They have human emotions after all. Their creation is the product of humanity's hubris and desire to control life itself, with no care or responsibility for the consequences. And when life is treated as an object or an experiment, it becomes warped and twisted. So the evil we see in Mewtwo and Frankenstein's monster is that of humanity's own, because they're shaped by the cruelty of the world imposed upon them. As humans, we have a fear of the other. We reject what we see as different and what we see as not belonging. These two artificial creations are the voice of the rejected, the ostracized monsters we create through our own rejection. They're very reflective visions of the consequences of artificial creation and playing God. When we create without compassion, empathy, or ethical morality, these are the results, and they remind us of our own responsibilities, our own need to be accountable for the life we create, artificial or otherwise. Interestingly, the inverse of these two entities is another artificial Pokemon, type Null. This was created for similar means as the ultimate life form, but in the game we see it rescued by Gladion and treated humanely as an equal, meaning it doesn't walk the same path as Mewtwo and is more of a natural Pokemon, even evolving through friendship rather than leveling or power. It ties into this idea of these creations being what humanity makes them through treatment and care. They're only monsters if we make them monsters. Who am I? What is my true reason for being? These words from Mewtwo sum up the core identity crisis of both it and Frankenstein's monster. Where the latter was inspired by the 19th century anxieties about science and industrialization, Mewtwo is like a modern interpretation of the idea, focusing on ideas of cloning and genetic engineering, like Dolly the sheep. Mewtwo's story zeroes in on the idea of identity and the ethics of artificial life, giving it a redemption Frankenstein's monster never really gets in its own story. Both of these entities are products of human ambition. They both suffer alienation that villainizes them and reflects the humanity of their rejection. Mewtwo is like an updated version of the iconic monster, with a similar struggle for personal identity after being created for selfish means. Humanity's own hubris creating the monsters that become our downfall. When we play God, we can't shirk the responsibility of confronting and shaping our creations, lest they turn against us for our own ignorance. Mewtwo isn't cool just because of a memorable design or a final boss feeling. Mewtwo is cool because it's a 19th century gothic horror tragedy brought into that whimsical, magical world of Pokemon. And that's just fantastic. So, I hope you enjoyed this video, thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to thank my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez, my Diamond level patrons, That One Sleep No More fan and Valtar, my Platinum level patron, Matthew Burns, and all my Gold level patrons, Chris Douglas, Daniel Shillito, and James Aleula Waterhouse. Thank you for supporting the channel.